Hey everyone, this is Karen with Naturally with Karen. Toxic brain number 2. And toxic brain number 2 of our series, which is meant to help you to understand what is going on with some of these conditions that we have. Tonight is just about Parkinson's disease. Who's there? Bless up, Kim. Good to see you. Tonight is just about Parkinson's disease, and I guarantee you that I'm going to give you insights from working with 5 men who've had Parkinson's disease, either initially diagnosed or a couple years in or 4 years in. Wonderful insights that you really need to know. Okay, before we get started, how would you know someone has Parkinson's? Is you would know because they would, come and they would have a diagnosis. But before they had a diagnosis, you would have some really big red flags. People would start to get stiff. They would start to get depressed. They would potentially have had years of constipation, at least off and on. They would have started to lose the swing in their arms when they walk. They'd start to lose their rhythm, and they'd start to have a lot of other situations, all that are related to stiffness, constipation, anxiety. And for some people, some of my clients actually had appendix removal. They had appendix, which is the brain of the gut, removed. So there are some commonalities with people that have had Parkinson's disease. Now, what's really interesting about Parkinson's disease, we'll get the dogs to sit down here, is that, and welcome for joining here. We're sitting in a nice quiet spot, so I was going to wait outside. Parkinson's is an issue which involves sympathetic dominance. When you get your hair tissue mineral analysis, it's going to say right on there, parasympathetic dominant or sympathetic dominant. And the easy way to remember what those mean on your hair test, I keep seeing tails go by on Hubby Luna. She got to go to the dog park today, which was a lot of fun, and we got to go get some sunshine on the body. So had some fun, got outside, went up to my garden at Duluth Community Garden and got it all watered. Your sympathetic nervous system is when you're in fight or flight mode. That means your adrenals are turned on and things are pumping, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're running away from a predator or that you're going home every night under a ton of stress. Think about your average business person that's really super hyper focused on deals. Think about any number of situations where people are really under a great deal of stress. Running a business, a company, parenting children. Think about a mom that's parenting children that are oppositionally defiant or going through battles with the schools, having conflicts with family members with addiction or anything that any of us could have gone through. So technically, you're going to see sympathetic dominance when you look at your hair tissue patient report. You can call it a TMA, a tissue mineral analysis, but it's really an HTMA. Okay. So that is the SNS, which is sympathetic dominant system. You're in fight or flight because oftentimes your minerals are always going to be either stimulating or sedating. So for example, magnesium is sedating, right? And other minerals are very stimulating. So if I see someone who's got a really super slow metabolism, I want to look to see which minerals I can use to stimulate them and get them a little bit of energy and maybe take them out of parasympathetic dominance where they're in the recovery mode and they're slow and they need a lot more energy to function in their life. Now, one of the things that really has a lot to do with your central nervous system, one of the most important spark plugs or trace elements is copper. Copper is your conductor, and that's why so many people on Facebook and social media and what else? I want to say flea markets that grew up going to huge flea markets in San Jose. That was like our every Sunday thing. We're selling copper jewelry and copper bracelets and copper earrings and all that. Copper is your conductor. It's really what's conducting the electricity in the central nervous system. So the heart and the brain, they really, really need copper, okay? Both multiple sclerosis and Parkinson's disease, MS and PD, anytime you see PD, you're thinking Parkinson's disease, are, get your pen and paper out, severe copper deficiency. Now, if you just get a blood test for copper, your copper might show that you have plenty of copper, or it might show that you might even have a little too much copper. When you get a hair tissue mineral analysis, we're looking at hair as tissue of the body, and it's going to show us the levels of copper in the tissues. So you're going to be able to see, do you have a liver full of copper or what's really going on? So your blood test and your hair tissue test, they might show an exact opposite result. And that's where your doctor might get really confused, okay? Animals, there's been studies on animals, which I don't really like and appreciate, but I'm going to let you know. Animal studies have shown dopamine was very low in animals, and copper that was related to Parkinson's disease, PD, and copper is an essential element in dopamine. Isn't that huge? So, you know, when you think about your feel-good chemicals and everything, and you think about the fact that doctors are handing out these antidepressants like candy, you're going to be able to learn from this live stream if you didn't know it already. And chances are the majority of the people actually don't know this, right? I didn't know it till I started doing a lot of studying with Dr. Watts, and I want to credit him for sure, dopamine has to have copper to build more dopamine, okay? So imagine if you're just going to your naturopathic doctor or, you know, someone that you see that's a coach, and they're like, you keep getting these infections, you better suck on zinc lozenges all the time, and you're already super copper deficient because no one actually did a hair tissue test for you, then you are actually going to end up harming yourself, because I'm going to tell you that of all the men, and it's always men, and I think that's because men have less copper anyway. Why? Because copper is related to estrogen. So copper and estrogen are very synchronous, right? Copper and estrogen they build each other. They're the same, essentially, right? On one level. So most of the men that I tested that I helped, and I'm going to get into this towards the end, and this is not going to be a super long one, I promise. And then maybe you enjoy them and maybe you don't. But I found that their zinc was really high and their copper was really low every single time. Before I even started studying and asking Dr. Watts, I was like, okay, wait a minute. I'm starting to feel like, and I think I even mentioned it to you, Kim, that I'm starting to feel like I'm working with Tin Man syndrome. Like, it was really interesting because my father used to make the Tin Man from The Wizard of Oz, and he would hang him up and sell them where he lives in Sun City, Arizona. And I would be like, well, isn't that really kind of interesting, because it's kind of really analogous to a lot of men that become exceptionally left hemispheric dominant and very analytical, low affect, right? I started thinking to myself, why is this happening? That it seems like, you know, the women are always considered so much more emotional, especially when all these years I'd read, you know, about how women were viewed as and treated as hysterical. And that's why we had hysterectomies, right? We removed the hysterical uterus. And on my YouTube channel, which this will be on, there's a video called The Hysterical Uterus. I wanted to call it The Hysterical Yoni. But I've got some notes here I want to stay on. So copper is an essential element for dopamine. Copper deficiency and severe copper deficiency is totally behind Parkinson's disease. I want you to order from me your HTMA profile too with the 30-minute consult. So when it comes in, I can have this time with you face to face and say, wow, this is exactly what's going on. I know exactly what to do to help you. But you're looking at $227 to give yourself what kind of diseases are coming up on the health trends. No phony baloney. If you read Dr. Watts' studies, he's actually double-blind, highly controlled, absolute science. That's why he did not support a lot of the work done by Dr. Andrew Cutler. And when I went into their Facebook group, a lot of the times they wouldn't budge when I would recommend other types of magnesium. Like I said, I've actually been working with my clients with magnesium glycinate for 20 years, since paying $350 for a consult with Dr. Kathleen Morris, who's a hormone expert, in 1999 and 2000. $350 for a 1-hour consult in which I got the nugget magnesium glycinate, the Cal brand, as she recommended at that time, KAL. And so now, for just about 20 years, I've been recommending that. But when I went into Dr. Cutler's group on Facebook, they just were not really supportive of that flexibility. So I talked to Dr. Watts. He did do a little bit of guidance with Dr. Andrew Cutler, who's now deceased, and may he rest in peace. But I trust Dr. Watts implicitly, and I really like the fact that he's super reliable. His science is very reliable, okay? Does everybody know what myelination is? So when it comes to children, our babies, infants, and into the toddler age from 0 to 2 to 24 months, that is approximately the window of time that a newborn into a toddler, 24 months approximately, not hardcore, is going to myelinate their whole system. So what I used to say 16 years ago, starting here, is I used to give the analogy, which I know, Kim, you've heard before, which was to a client of mine that's still living that moved to Lake Havasu. If you left your tractor outside in the snow year after year and the coating wore off of the wires, would you be able to start your tractor? And he's like, well, no. And I'm like, well, this is what's happening to you. You're losing your protective myelination, which is like the coating on your wiring for your vehicle. And your vehicle now is kind of stiff and slow, and your reflexes aren't really fast, and you're losing your rhythm and your cadence and your circadian rhythm and all these things, right? All right. So copper is crucial for myelination, that coating. It doesn't mean that just because between 0 and 2 that that's all supposed to be forming for you, because what? 0 to 2 would be the bare bones minimum that you would be nursing from mama, from the breast, okay? So for all of you mamas that nursed longer, that had all this pushback from people because of cold mother, oh, you shouldn't be doing it that long, or that's kind of ridiculous. No, it's not, because you needed those minerals from mama to make that myelination, okay? I'm going to give a lot of nuggets in this video, and I give a lot more to my clients. So whether or not you've studied and listened to these videos all the way through, my calcium and all these, I'm going to be giving a lot. I have so much to give, and I'm so excited to do it. So hang on there with me, okay? Myelination is, myelin is basically fatty. I wanted to make sure and write that down so I didn't forget a few things. I've got my 2 pages of notes here that I wanted to say, okay, wait, that's right. I worked with these guys, and these are things I learned, and these are things I learned from David Watts, so that I can give you guys a really nice synopsis so that you really get it. So Parkinson's disease is not something that just affects somebody like, oh my gosh, I got Parkinson's disease for no good reason, right? I'm going to go over some of the reasons that you could be struck with Parkinson's disease that you might not know. Myelin is fatty, okay? And copper is essential for your nerves. So the myelin is fatty. So you would get, again, you would get a lot of that from breast milk. You're not going to get it from feeding baby rice, cereal, and junk in, pre-made. Oh, thank you, Kim. In pre-made baby food jars and stuff like that, when we can get little grinders and make fresh food. I mean, that's what I did. I blended up food for my son. You know, I baked fresh yams and everything else. I didn't want to give him Earth's Best baby food and all those kinds of things, even though they're great, but it's old stale food in a jar. You know, it's like we don't want to eat from cans. So in a rare situation, you know, you're going to go to a party and you've got to make some quick hummus to take out the door. I get, you know, the cans of the non-toxic garbanzo beans for sure, but I don't want to eat out of cans most of the time. I do like recycled jars though. Hey, awesome. You made fresh food for Ari too. Okay. One of the big things with Parkinson's disease is decreased blood flow. So when you have toxic brain, and Parkinson's disease is a glaring example of toxic brain with no guilt tripping. It could have come from you having lots of mercury amalgams. It could have come from a whole host of things. It could come from your habits. It could come from your environment. It could also come from your genetics, multiple generations, right? And we're going to go over all that. Decreased blood flow for the frontal cortex, okay? The frontal cortex is what is affected, according to Dr. Gary Coles, who I learned from in 2003 and 4 before he retired here in Duluth, Minnesota. He has the Mind Freedom Project, and he writes the weekly column in the Reader paper, which anyone can read anywhere in the United States or probably the world. Antidepressants decrease blood flow in the frontal cortex. So one of the pieces that I started putting together myself back in 2004 was, oh my gosh, we're going to have a huge segment of our population that's going to go into neurodegenerative diseases just by way of them being prescribed so many antidepressants. And 3 out of the 5 of my Parkinson's male clients were taking 2 antidepressants already, okay? Now, so decreased blood flow in the frontal cortex, right? The cortex is where all the messages go. All the lights light up on the frontal cortex and everything is moving around. Low dopamine. So low dopamine is where a doctor is going to finally diagnose you. Hey, your dopamine's really down in the toilet. Now, every time you get onto a social media like Facebook and you're liking stuff or you post something on your wall and you look back to say, oh, today I got 5 likes on that. That's amazing, right? I'll never forget that Anthony said one day, you're getting a dopamine hit, you know, and just like shopping and clicking buy and clicking like and, you know, going to see, those are dopamine hits. And I was like, oh my gosh, how brilliant is that? That's amazing. You know, so decreased blood flow for the frontal cortex or not enough blood flow. Think of those antidepressants again. Think about, you know, warning your family members. If you're coaching, let people know this. Let's see. So I've had 2 clients that were taking Cinnamint, and I'm going to go into that in a little bit, but that is carbidopa and levodopa. And it's basically a way to get a synthetic version of dopamine or to enhance dopamine in the body. So that's typically what people are taking unless they've got irregular heartbeat or different kinds of things, and they'll find a different medication. But that's kind of like the standard today. Most of the time, I found that the people that I was working with, the 5 gentlemen, were really at a very, very high intelligence level. They were really, really super achievers and highly intelligent. All 5 of them ran their own companies. They were some of the most highly intelligent people I've ever known. 3 of them are still alive, 2 of them are not. And what I really want to say with absolute respect to everyone here is that it's really important that we get on it as absolutely as soon as possible, because in my way, if I'm going to work with you and I have experience working with Parkinson's disease, as well myasthenia gravis and others, I need to gather. I'm gathering not only facts, medications, diet, you know, habits, surgeries, what's going on, family support, who's going to be making your food, which is why I want the center, because actually 2 of the 5 said in the last 2.5 years, the 2 of the 5 Parkinson's clients said, if you would have had a center, I would have gone there for 6 months and I would have only eaten your food and my family wouldn't have had to try to do this. And one of those 2, the wife was absolutely not willing to do it. She was still making pork sliders and getting McDonald's, frappes and stuff like that every day. And it was impossible, just like it's impossible for a lot of people. So without having the center that I want so much, where people can come and we've got this delicious raw food and it's organic and there's fresh chai and there's going to be a lot more because I'm going to make a personal plan for each person without giving medical advice. So one person would have gone, 2 people of the 5 said they definitely would have gone and probably done at least 6 months at the center so that it did not put such a burden and a strain on their family, and that they could have been under my direct supervision. When a person detoxifies, they can eject cysts, they can have up and down blood pressure, temperature, moods, everything else. And depending on what's going on and how long that they've been degenerating at that level, meaning they've already been diagnosed, there's already limited blood flow in the frontal cortex, they've already been overlapping all these medications. I ideally would love to have an allopathic physician that would be someone that would come in and kind of work in conjunction with the work that I'm doing so that we can keep ourselves out of legal liability land and that person can oversee medication transition. So I'm going to put that out there into the universe too. Okay. Thoughts, absolutely proven, thoughts are like dendrites, right? We talked about mirror neurons, this rise. And mirror neurons mean that whether you're actually doing the act or you're thinking about the act, having done the act before, mirror neurons don't feel any differently. Neurons are your nerve cells. They're conducting electricity in your brain all the time. So when you have toxic brain, you are not conducting electricity. So you think slower. That's why you started getting brain fog. That's why you started forgetting things. That's why you started having short-term memory issues. That's why your eyesight got worse. That's why you started to need hearing aids. That's why you started to get gray hair. That's why you started to not walk with a bounce in your step. You didn't want to dance anymore. And the shaman would say, how come you're not smiling and dancing? How come? Right? And we would figure this out. And this is what I do for my clients, okay? So the arm swing, but also when I look in the mouth and I'm talking with someone through the screen, I can see I can't exactly do it, but the tongue kind of goes back and forth just slightly. And it's moving in the mouth. They're talking or they're listening to you and their mouth is slightly open and they're like this. But the tongue is going back and forth. It's wavering, okay? And that's something I've picked up on, that when I'm working with clients and they don't have a diagnosis yet, I can see that tongue starting to move. I go, uh-oh, we're going into Parkinson's land. This is not good, okay? Genes express, and while a lot of folks are talking about protein, it is qualitatively proven that your protein comes from amino acids. Amino acids come from fruits and vegetables, primarily fruits, primarily seeded fruits that contain the trace elements that you need. When these people are taking the seeds out of our watermelons and seeds out of this and seeds out of lemons and seeds out of that, they're removing your trace elements. That's the spark of life. We need that, okay? So these amino acids make protein into dendrites. So the whole fallacy of eat to give yourself energy is actually false, okay? If you had mineral-rich water and mineral-rich, ether-rich air that was moist and humid, you would be eating very, very little. You'd be eating the equivalent of a bowl every single day of leaves and berries and super, super high-packed, nutrient-dense food from high-quality soil. And you would be depositing that soil, as I told Nature Boy a long time, several years ago, and you would be refertilizing the earth on a constant basis. So these are ideas that I've all put out there, okay? If you did not get that, amino acids make up your dendrites. The locomotion of your lungs that are mucus-free, they would have never had mucus that you don't even know that you have in the bottom of your bronchial tubes. And eventually when a person gets so compacted with mucus, they end up attracting bacteria, and they end up in a bacterial pneumonia, okay? Or they end up, if there's anger and bacteria and mucus, they end up in bronchitis. Bronchitis is anger and grief, mucus and bacteria. That's what it is, okay? And what do we do but we give an anti-life pill, okay? So anxiety, when I look back on the wellness forums, because I kind of clicked on the wellness forums that people do online to work with me, and appendix removal. The appendix is the brain of the gut, but in times past, they were removed because the appendix, the tonsils, the adenoids were seen as superfluous features or organs of the body that, yeah, we didn't really need those. We can just get rid of those. And it's kind of like how we see the gallbladder today. And the gallbladder for me is the seat of repressed anger, but it has a lot to do with your bile. So if you've got a lot of toxic elements as a child, you're going to get something that I was diagnosed with in my 20s, which is called Gilbert's syndrome. And Gilbert's syndrome is hyperbilirubinemia. And hyperbilirubinemia, because we're going with Harry Potter names again, means you're making excess bile, and you're making excess bile because my whole mouth was filled with mercury fillings, and my body needed to know what could it do to possibly get rid of them. But did you know that I've never one time had a single doctor tell me, you don't have Gilbert's syndrome anymore. In fact, the first time when I was about 25, 26 years old, I went in because the whites of my eye, which are called your sclera, right? The white part of your eye is called the sclera, S-C-L-E-R-A, and it was jaundice. And people around me were telling me, you know, the whites of your eyes are kind of yellow. And I was like, oh my God, that must be really bad. And they said, I think you better go to the doctor like right away. It looks pretty serious. And I went in there and they did blood testing, and she goes, oh my gosh, like, you're positive for every hepatitis. We don't even know how. You've got to be feeling really, really sick. This was in San Jose, California. So it wasn't like in, you know, Bumblebeeville, USA, somewhere where there's like no people. This was in Silicon Valley. And so she goes, you know, why don't you come back? Because she goes, you don't feel sick? And I go, I don't feel sick at all. Like, I'm going to work. I work at the Rusty Pelican as a waitress, and I'm in college, and I'm doing all these things, and I feel just fine. And she's like, well, okay, you come back in like a week, and we're going to kind of look into this. And so when I came back, she goes, never diagnosed this before, but you have Gilbert's syndrome. And I'm like, what the hell is that? You know? And she goes, well, that's where you just make like a lot of bilirubin. So later, come to find out, and you can't find it anywhere, like try researching it for yourself, Gilbert's syndrome, or Gilbert's disease, which is Gilbert's. It's spelled like Gilbert's, but it's Gilbert's because it's French. And come to find out, my body was trying to get rid of all of this stuff. What's up, Chance? Good to see you. Appendix was common, I found, with my clients. Maybe it's not common in the whole mix of people with Parkinson's, but it was common with my clients. I've worked with 5 people with Parkinson's disease, including last year. And I wish that I could tell you that I've cured Parkinson's disease, but in a way, I feel like I really did, except that through the detoxification process, there can be problems. And because I've done extensive detoxification, I want the center. because I'm not someone who goes, yeah, just go alkaline, or you need to do this, you need to talk. That's great. That's a good start. But I've seen a lot. And now that I've seen a lot, I can kind of, it's like any other experience level. Once you have a very sophisticated expert level of experience, which I think 35 years of detoxification is expert level, right? You can then prevent a lot of mayhem, a lot of problems, a lot of chaos. And then I can train other people so that eventually people can come in and they can build other centers in other places. And 2 to 5 years, we can set up a plan similar to Michael Tellinger's plan, which is very similar to my own. We were thinking along the same lines, same time. Might as well have more minds on board and me not be so competitive that I can't see anyone else as having something beneficial. His and mine are extremely similar, except that his involves single family dwellings and still farming, animals for food. Mine does not. Mine includes a plant-based food forest and earth ships and structures built through a spiral-based, fractal-based living. Okay, mine's a little bit more similar to Elisha's, but it looks more like Hobbit homes. So we have the ability to have something much different, and that's going to be less of an impact on the environment. So 2 to 5 years, and we can turn things around so that instead of saying, well, I can't even afford to go heal myself. I mean, for God's sakes, there's people over in Africa that can't even afford the basics in the food. How in the hell is someone going to be able to afford $10,000 a month, just like going to Patagonia, Arizona, over to Dr. Cousins' place. And yet to be a business and afford, the food, the license, the people, the workers' comp and everything else, you got to be able to, be profitable, or you're going to close your doors. Okay. So here's what I learned with Parkinson's disease on the last 2 men that I worked with. They were both being prescribed 1 or more antidepressants. They were just prescribed Sinemet. Sinemet is Sinemet, is a prescription. Remember, it's the synthetic levocarbidopa. And those ingredients tended to produce an inability, like one of the side effects of the medication is trouble sleeping. So then the doctors are layering a 4th medication, which is Klonopin, which is a benzodiazepine or benzo, which is very addictive, and it's very detrimental to use over the long term. So now what I used in a couple of instances, not just for Parkinson's, but we'll stay on Parkinson's right now, is I used RSO. And in capital letters, R as in Ricky, S as in Sam, O as in Oscar, RSO. If you don't know, does anybody not know what RSO is? So RSO is Rick Simpson's oil, and it's the most potentiated THC substance, and it's been cooked down. You can make your own. If you're living somewhere where it's still illegal, you can get cannabis buds, and you can get something. Hang on just a moment. I'll show you something. You can buy this for $200. It is a magical butter machine, and it automatically makes it for you. Okay. And this is the container it comes in. You can see this is the little cooker over here, and you can program it for a tincture, a butter, or whatever else that you want. It comes with a little glove. Okay. You can see over here that you can make the little bars of butter. Okay. So I'm going to put this down. And what you would be doing is you would be going through about a 3 or 4 step process to make Rick Simpson's oil. There's YouTube videos about how to make Rick Simpson's oil. In my last 2 cases, both men had never, ever in their lives, and they were close to or in their early 70s, never, ever used cannabis. It was something they'd never even tried. I thought I had a hell of a lot of respect for them, because I suggested, with the first gentleman, I sent him home with a DVD about 5 years ago, way before we started working together, or he was officially diagnosed with Parkinson's. And I said, I want you to watch this, because I sent home about 25 of my clients in the physical here in Minnesota. DVD that had 5 or 6 different sections on it. It had cannabis for juicing. It had the Rick Simpson story on it. It had a couple of different things. So they went home and they brought the DVD back, because it was a loan situation. I loaned it out to them and they borrowed it. And they came back and they were like, wow, that's really kind of cool. And I was like, well, Minnesota, is not illegal. Cannabis is not legal here. And concentrates, depending on where you live, you need to really be very careful, because Rick Simpson's oil is taking the THC of the cannabis, the hydro part of the cannabis, the part that actually gets you to feel the high, if you will. The medicine is in, the leaves as well as the THC. So in Rick Simpson's oil, you're turning it into a concentrate, and a concentrate in Minnesota is still a felony to my knowledge. So you would not legally, and I do not legally, don't turn me in, because I've never used my magical butter machine. I'm going to say that right now. You can buy RSO if you live in Colorado, if you live in Washington, if you live in California, if you live in Arizona and you've got a medical card, if you live in lots of states, but many states do not have medical marijuana dispensaries, and so you can't buy it. What you can do if you want to be illegal is get a magical butter machine for about $200 with all of your silicone trays to make your butters. You can make your RSO. If you're a coach, you can help your client, which is what I've done for many years, and say, here's what I know about Rick Simpson's oil, RSO. Here's why I think it's going to help you with Parkinson's disease. And I even went so far as to give my clients a short YouTube video from a patient or two that had Parkinson's that used RSO. And I said, here's what I think. I said, when it comes to RSO, I think it's going to give you more of an appetite, just like people that have cancer and have gone through chemotherapy or don't have an appetite in general. It's an apoptotic. So an apoptotic means that it discharges negative cells. Like Bob Marley said, the herb reveals you to yourself, and I'm an herbalist, and I'm going to always keep cannabis, although I'm not super liberal with everybody take cannabis and that it's the heal-all for everything. I do believe that it's something that I keep in my medicine bag as a tool, okay? It reveals, like Bob Marley said, it reveals the self. It reveals you to yourself. It reveals you to yourself. A lot of people that have never ever used cannabis for a short time or a long time never had that inward, contemplative, introspective journey. And part of healing is not me just noting all the mind body when I note the words you use and the body language that you have on the screen and the energy that's going on, and you're sharing your experiences. And some people, because a few of my clients were actually every single day on the screen in session with me, every single day, one man with Parkinson's and his wife. And sometimes family members would say, well, you guys are doing a lot of visiting. To the person on the outside, if you've got a 45-minute session every day, okay, it's going to look like visiting when you say, hey, how's it going? Because you can be relaxed, and I give people with regular sessions a package deal, so they did not pay $125 a day. They paid quite a bit less than that. I'm on time. No matter what I had going on in my life, I received enormous compliments. Frequently I was told, you're one of the smartest people we know. I was very, very humbled and honored by that. But I try to really be a service that someone cannot find elsewhere, whether it's their concierge doctor or no matter what it is. I want to be above and beyond, and I want to go to work. So I was researching and reading medical abstracts when we were not in session, so that I could speak very intelligently to their concierge. Some people have VIP medical. Some of my clients do. They're very wealthy. And I could go in and say, this is what I'm reading about these, you know, this and that, and convey it in very sophisticated terms so that I'm also respected and the client's respected and feels like they're in good hands, like Allstate, right? You're in good hands. Okay. The RSO, the cannabis, the THC also heals neurons. What I did after that is, let me back up. In the very beginning, what I like to do, if someone comes and says, I just got a Parkinson's diagnosis, or I think I'm getting Parkinson's, but I'm not officially diagnosed, I'm scared, I'm thinking about what you're saying. I have 3 people I'm working with right now that I told them on the screen, you are going into Parkinson's, and, you know, I can't diagnose you, but if you think about the symptoms and you tell, you know, your stiffness and the different things that you have going on, you definitely, with the anxiety and everything else going on, you need to be warned, and your zinc levels are super high, okay? So what I want to do is see that hair tissue mineral analysis, because I want to see if that zinc is really high. What I found on the last 2 folks with Parkinson's disease is that they had super high aluminum and mercury, higher than I would really be comfortable with. And so I have to set up an order of operations, meaning I'm going to gather, I'm going to stabilize that person, make sure their constipation's gone, make sure they're digesting okay, and then I'm going to go through and do some detoxification, which might also include making sure that they're also going to be able to chelate out those heavy metals, okay? So that's what detoxification is going to be. And through this process, if we can get through the whole thing because of cysts and everything else, whoops, excuse me 1 minute. All right, there we go. We're going to be able to do the healing to the degree that we can, okay? So I want you to know that I also showed my clients a short video years ago, and even recently in 2017 and 2018, when we would work together over the video, is I would show them a video that showed how the neurons were like the branches on the tree and how they were starting to really shorten and retract. Because when a person is exposed to mercury, they start to really retract down. So those dendrites that are reaching out to communicate, like we talked about the frontal cortex, they're not going to work as well. So I did find with my own clients, just my own history, I found high zinc levels and low copper, or even if it looked like it was pretty balanced, sometimes the person had more of the copper that needed to be mobilized and excreted from the liver. I was thankful to be able to work together with Dr. Watts, you know, on the phone with one person, because I wanted to be so very careful and make sure that I'm really doing the best and providing the best. So anyway, that's all I wanted to say today. That's about Parkinson's disease. Why is it a toxic brain? Because the mercury and the aluminum that started to shorten the neurons and some of the cortex, you know, and the blood flow issues could have come from medications, vaccinations with aluminum, the land that you live on, and environmental exposures. It could have come from a great deal of stress. It could have come from having the appendix removed, right? Because the appendix had a lot to do with also making more hormones. It could have come from, as a lot of people are starting to say, Parkinson's is a disease that starts in the gut. But while I think that's a really big factor, I don't think that's everything, and that's my personal opinion. So I hope that this has been super, super helpful. I wonder if you don't have any questions, I'll go ahead and end now. I'm going to ask you to share this and to put some tags on it about Parkinson's disease, because my feelings, and I think several other people share my feelings, are that we're used to seeing people in their 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s become diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, but we're going to start seeing people quite a bit earlier with Parkinson's disease. And the reason for that is because of so many generations being exposed to mercury. So I hope this helps. I want to thank you, Kim, for staying through the whole thing. And I know that you will have learned quite a bit. I don't know if it's chance it's still with us, but it shows I've got 2 people watching right now. And so I wish you all a beautiful night, and take good care. Be sure and subscribe and share this, because once I get to 1,000 viewers on YouTube, I'll be able to live stream and not be just sitting here in my house. All right. Thank you.